Welcome to our today's video on bond buybacks. My name is O'Brien. To understand bond buybacks easily, we need first to look at the meaning of that term bond buyback. And we will divide this word into two. The first one is a bond. We have discussed it over and over again in this channel. A bond is an electronic paper that acknowledges the legal existence of a borrowing agreement between a lender and a borrower, who is in this case the government, through the central bank. The bond is issued on specific terms, which includes a maturity date, a specific date on which this instrument is retired, and the borrower, who is the government, pays back the amount invested to the investor or the lender, including any arrears or any balances on coupons. A bond buyback then means this is the purchase of an existing instrument by the issuer or the borrower before the maturity. A bond buyback will be necessitated for various reasons, but for this one, it's obvious that our government is facing an imminent financial risk and default risk in year 2025, particularly in the months of April and May. This is because of the existence of heavy maturities or saturation of maturities of short-term instruments in the month of April and May in 2025. And therefore, the government has been perusing through options on how to manage the looming crisis in April and May, which would otherwise pose a financial risk or a default risk. A risk is a probability that something not very good could happen. And for a financial risk is that the maturities, the accumulated amounts that are supposed to be retired in the month of April and May, the sum required is so huge that there is a risk that the government, if they wait until the month of April and May to retire those instruments, it might be difficult for the government to raise enough funds to retire all those instruments. And therefore, because of that risk, for purposes of managing their debt, the government has been opting either to issue a switch bonds that came in late 2014, and we did this video on switch bonds. The government has also pondered on suspending issuance of the 364-day Treasury bill, and that came through the Debt Management Strategic Report of 2025, and for that reason we did this video. And the last option has been through the bond buybacks, which appears to be the option that the government has considered viable to manage their looming crisis. So what the bond buyback intends to do is the government using the available cash flow now to reduce the amounts and securities to be retired in the month of April and May. So that at that time, through the normal issuance of bonds, the government will be able to settle the redemptions that should come in April and May. So to say that buybacks is just one of the many options for managing maturities, for managing high saturation of maturities of bonds on a specific period of time. A switch bond is made to stagger, or a switch bond is made to commute the maturing short-term securities from a saturated period to future staggered dates, thereby reducing reducing the looming financial risk. A bond buyback purchases or redeems partially over a period of time, thereby reducing the amounts, the huge saturations that are supposed to be redeemed on that specific time when that looming risk is expected. There are two benefits to the government in a bond buyback. And one is that the government saves a lot on coupons for the period after the buybacks. And the other reason, and the other advantage for a bond buyback It also reduces the financial risk and default risk, thereby preserving the good name or reputation of the government. A bond buyback, on the other hand, will also give at least two benefits to the bond holder, and in particular for the bond buyback that has already been issued. One is that the bond holders of these targeted bonds are going to liquidate low coupon bonds and get an opportunity to reinvest such amounts into higher yielding securities or in other opportunities. The other benefit to the bond holder is that when you release or liquidate through a bond buyback, you save a lot on brokerage fees because normally bonds are liquidated or sold through the secondary market through the use of the market intermediaries, and those are brokers, and there is a fee attached to those transactions. But in the event of a bond buyback by the central bank in the primary market, then that does not involve the brokerage fees. This is different from a bond rediscounting, where a bond rediscounting originates from the bondholder, while a bond buyback originates from the issuer, that is the central bank. In a bond rediscounting, the bondholder has failed to get a possible buyer of the bond in the secondary market, and then that bondholder exercises the only remaining option of selling back that instrument to the central bank through a process we call rediscounting. And rediscounting and bond rediscounting is done at 3% more, at a rate that is 3% higher than the prevailing market rate or coupon rate, whichever is higher. But for a bond buyback, the price or the rate at which these bonds are bought back by the government is determined through an auction. And therefore, there is a better chance of getting a better price in a bond buyback compared to a bond rediscounting. We shall be looking at the specific dates and the conditions for these bond buyback after 3 seconds short break, so don't go away. In the meantime, as always, give a like to this video and engage in the comment section. See you after 3 seconds short break. Welcome back to our bond buyback. Thank you for your like. Thank you for your comment. And if you are new to the channel, give us your subscription and don't forget to hit the notification button, because YouTube will be sending you a notification when we upload our next value-packed video. The government has issued 3 bonds targeted for the buyback. These 3 bonds include the FXD1 2022-3, meaning that this bond was issued in 2022 for a period of 3 years, and therefore this bond is supposed to mature in 2025. The bond has a coupon of 11.7660%, and it's supposed to mature, or its redemption date is on 7th April 2025. The second bond is the FXD1 2025. This bond was issued in the year 2020 for 5 years, and also is supposed then to mature in 2025. The bond is of a coupon of 11.6670%, and its specific redemption date, maturity date, is 5th May 2025. And the third targeted bond is the IFB1 2016-9. Therefore, the bond being issued in 2016 for 9 years means that this bond was meant to mature in 2025, and it has a coupon of 12.50%, and its specific maturity date is 12th May of 2025. So as identified, these 3 targeted bonds are part of the clustered maturities that pose a financial risk to the government in the month of April and May. in an effort to reduce the amounts that will be required to be collected for purposes of redemptions of April and May 2025, then the government opts to reduce such clustered huge maturities by purchasing these bonds from the market. This is an optional buyback. The holders of the bonds will not be forced to liquidate their instruments if they don't want to sell their bonds. They can still hold on the bonds and wait for the specified maturities where they will be paid back the face values of the amounts that are invested and the last coupons. The buyback will be managed or carried out through an auction just like the normal issue of bonds. And the purpose of the auction mainly will be to determine the market weighted rate at which these bonds will be bought back by the government. And that is where the advantage lies as opposed to rediscounting the bond back to the government. These bonds, if you look at their coupon rates, the first two are in the region of 11.76%, and the third one is 12.5%. And if you compare these coupon rates with the current market interest rate of about 11.3%, then these bonds that are being bought back has coupon rates that are slightly higher than the prevailing market interest rates. That is a pointer towards the market rate at which these bonds will be bought back. That points towards a premium, but the price is heavily dependent on the auction because this auction will have competitive bids and non-competitive bids under the same conditions as a normal issue on bonds. For competitive bidders, they will have to be selling. If you are selling, you are bidding to sell back an amount or a value of a minimum of 2 million. You can bid competitively, but it's always advised to go for the non-competitive bidding. The competitive bidders, that pool is the one that determines the rate at which the non-competitive bidders' options will be accepted at. And that is to say that because this is a targeted buyback, then this option or auction does not target the masses. The auction targeted only those investors or individuals who are holding these three bonds or either of the three bonds. And that is to say then that if you don't hold any of these three bonds, the feature for buyback will not appear in your DAO-ZSD account. But if you are holding either of these bonds, you'll have that feature to bid for the buyback. And you are bidding under the following conditions. Condition number one, it is either you are bidding competitive and non-competitive, and the advice is that go for the non-competitive option. The second one, condition is that, as we have said, is you must be a holder of this particular bond. But the third condition is that the auction is optional. What that means is that you can opt to bid for an amount or a part of what you are holding. If you are holding a bonds, either of these bonds with a face value, for example, of 200,000 shillings, you can opt to sell back 50,000 and remain holding 150,000. You can hope to sell 100,000 or the entire holding of 200,000. But the condition is that you must bid for multiples of 50,000, just like we normally bid in a normal auction. So you are not compelled to dispose of the entire holding of either of the bond that you're holding. You can go for whatever amount that you wish. The other condition is that bonds are going to be bought back either at par, premium, or at a discount, dependent on the outcomes of the auction. The other condition, for you to bid for your bond, those bonds will be accepted on condition they are not encumbered. That is that there are no encumbrances on those bonds. Simply to say you have not used those bonds as securities for loans, or you have not used those bonds as securities in courts, or they are not being held by third parties for whatever reasons. If they are held in lien, then the other condition applies that if there are pledges on either of the bonds that you are bidding for, then you must ensure that those pledges are cancelled at least 5 days before the value date for these bonds for them to be accepted. If you cancel later or in a period that is less than 5 days, then automatically your bid will be rejected. The specific dates for this buyback, you are given a bidding period from 7th February to 17th February to place your bid. That means that, as always, the last day of the bidding period becomes the auction date, and therefore the auction will take place on 17th February, which will be on a Monday. There is a reason for Monday. Then, for any successful bids, the settlements or the payments will be done on 19th February, which is going to be a Wednesday. Observe the coincidence that the current issue of infrastructure bonds, the settlement or the value date is on 17th February, the same day when the auction date for these ones will happen. Then the payment date or the value date for the buyback auction happens on Wednesday, 19th February. Bonds are issued for different purposes, including budgetary support, infrastructure financing, and bond refinancing. The coincidence that we have infrastructure bonds whose value date, we are paying for the infrastructure bonds on 17th of February, the same day is when the auction for the buyback happens, and the payments for the buybacks happen in 19th of February. I can say no more. Thank you for watching, and see you in our next video.